we discovered how the tattoo community invented the new cemetery, right? My generation said granite headstones, and the tattoo generation said, I'm not feeling it. Nobody goes to those places. And they put it on their skin, including the grieving process of the pain. Were you struck by how many tombstones showed up in children and adults that had passed?
It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And one man we had the opportunity to speak to, who was an Iraqi vet, a fellow who had really suffered a lot in life. I call him Banged Up Mike. That's what his name is, Mike. And he told me the story of being thrown up against a wall when he was in kindergarten, and then when he was a child, he fell out of a tree and almost didn't survive. And in Iraq, he had explosive devices go off near him that rattled his brain. And though to look at him, you'd say he's a competent, functioning adult man, he is clearly rattled neurologically, psychologically, spiritually, emotionally. And that's all recounted all over his body. He had a picture up here of his beautiful picture. It looked like a photograph that had been tattooed on his upper chest of his daughter, young daughter, who died some years ago. A heart that was too big for her body. And then he started talking about things on his back, and I asked if we could see, and he had what I guess I'd call farmer overalls on, and he just dropped the tops and turned around in this big broad back of a canvas with an exquisite picture that's taken years to accomplish. He's been working on this piece with the same artist in another part of the country for 10 years. And it's a picture that shows down in the foreground a motorcycle on a road that winds its way through kind of a picturesque and peaceful valley, which is actually a cemetery, and then disappears over the horizon. But before that road leaves your view, it's as if this man, Banged Up Mike, was saying, I'm making this journey, but it doesn't stop in the cemetery. It goes all the way under the shadow of the cross, which is appearing there out in front of the sun that's shining its rays in a beautiful set of mountains off in the distance. And he's having each of the people in his life who are important to him tattooed on each of the tombstones there. And he said, if my artist stops doing what they do, if they die or move away, the project is done. But I'm not done. He, like so many other people that we have talked to, feels the need to carry what's significant, what's most important in his life with him. Somehow he feels completed by carrying and caring for the people and the moments in his life that have meant the most to him. It's such powerful stuff.
I was thinking, Michael, as you're talking, the thing that came to mind is just hospitality. And I think that's something else that I'm learning this week, that as you invite people in and you do it with great hospitality and you do it with no strings attached, hey, come and eat with us, come and be with us, that when you do that, people see that and they understand that. They understand true hospitality, that you're welcome to my home just as you are. You don't have to rub off your tats. You don't have to clean up your speech. You can come into my home just as you are. And as I think about that, I really think about God's hospitality to us as we come to his table, as we pull up our chairs at his banquet, and he tells us all, come just as you are. You don't have to clean yourself up. You don't have to, you know, keep all the commandments. You just need to come to me. Come to me, and I will, clothe you, and I will take you just like you are, and love you, and let you bring your feet under my table. And when people get that, and they know that they're loved and cared for, there's just a willingness to bear all and to share all. And so, I believe if we as a church will be more hospitable, like our God is to us, that people will allow us into the depths of their soul and their life, to be a friend and to walk together as we walk through this broken world.
We're going to ask Dave, our video guy, what is he thinking? And maybe Michael can record Dave, even include his video. Dave, what are you thinking, friend?
I've just been awestruck by the range of things that we have heard and seen this week. I remember talking to one young lady, about 31 years old, came up and she had her newborn, 5 or 6 month old baby in a pouch right in front of her. And we started talking, and she had various tattoos all over her body. And I asked her, I said, just tell me, which one means the most to you? And she said, well, that's easy. And she pointed down to her calf, and she said, these are the footprints of my baby with his name over top of it. And she shared with me, she said, it took me 10 years to get pregnant. And I said, how did you feel when you found out that you were pregnant? And immediately the tears of joy started coming down her face. And she said, at first I didn't believe it. She said, my mother told me, she said, I think you're pregnant. And she was like, no, that can't be true. And her mother kept on her and on her. And she's finally, to quiet her mother, she agreed to take a pregnancy test. And she said when she got the results, she ran upstairs with such joy. And that was one of the most joyful moments I've seen this week. And then I think it was on the first day we were there, a guy, an older fellow who looked like he could have been a member of ZZ Top. He had the gray beard down to here. He was tattooed all over the place. And he came by and he was very introspective. And he was talking about, does your tattoo have a story? And he was literally covered from head to toe. And he looked at me and he said, one of mine does have an interesting story. And he started talking, and he only got 2 sentences into the story, and you could see the tears starting to well up in his eyes. And he stopped for a moment, and I just sat there with him. And he looked at me and he said, maybe another time. And he walked on. There's just great range from great joy to unspeakable sorrow in people. And it's just, I've told people a number of times, I said, you don't know what it is, how much of an honor it is for me that you would be willing to allow me into your sacred space and share these sacred moments with you. And they look at me like, oh no, thank you. And how many times, like Rose said, people have said, what you're doing matters. This is important. People, need to understand that we're people, and they really want to be heard. Our culture talks about the need for authenticity. And tattoos are often about as authentic as you can get, but unfortunately they're still in many places so taboo that we won't touch them, but they're just begging to be touched because they are the pinnacle of authenticity. It's what's really inside somebody that's wanting to be heard. And as you know, members of Christ's body, we need to hear each other.
You know, one of the things our team came to a decision on is we are going to start a research project on the tattoo artist. And we're looking for 15 artists that we can study and ask such questions as, why has culture given you a place of hearing the secrets of the soul? Why are they the destination of so much that's going on the inside? And paid to write on the outside what's going on the inside. And we're thinking about calling the book The Confessor. And because they are being confessed to, and we just put the idea out like a little fragile, and suddenly tattoo artists were coming out of nowhere and saying, I want in. And we're looking for the guy or the gal that's been in it for 10, 20, 30 years, and we're finding them. But Dave said something very thoughtful this morning that I want to pivot on. That tattoos seem to be taking us to the age of lamentation. And I live a lot in praise, right? But when I study the scriptures, it lives a lot in lamentations. And Dave cracked something open for me about tattoos being lamentations. What are you thinking, Dave?
Even when we read the Gospels, Jesus spent time lamenting over the fate of Jerusalem and how they would not repent, they would not trust in him. The Psalms are just loaded with the reality of feeling forsaken, feeling lost. And the Psalms are the worship hymnal of the Old Testament church, and even and still ours to work in today. There's something in the human experience that requires us the ability to lament over our conditions. And the Lord invites us to bring that into worship. In one of my favorite songs, Michael Card sings, it's called Come Lift Up Your Sorrows. And it talks about how Jesus invites us to bring our sorrows to him in worship, and to worship him with our wounds, because he's been wounded too. He understands. And oftentimes when I'm experiencing deep personal hurt, this song, it's got a great kind of a jazz feel, a jazz vibe. And Michael Card actually told me one time when I was talking with him, he said, this is the favorite thing that I've ever written. He said, I love this song. He said, it's not my favorite song of all. He said, but it's the most favorite thing I've done. And it's just, we can worship him with our wounds because he was wounded too, and he knows. And there's just something in that we come to church on Sunday morning, we think we have to have the happy face and the joyful face and the joy of the Lord. But most of the Psalms don't live in that joyful space. They live in that hard space where we spend most of the week. And it just doesn't follow that we should, where we're spending our week is where we need to spend it should be a different place than where we spend on Sunday morning, that we can bring all of our joys, all of our sorrows into worship and worship God in wholeness. And these tattoos that we see, people are lamenting what happened. I talked to a guy yesterday, and he showed me his tattoo. It was a memorial for his stepdad, who was a survivor of the Bataan Death March. He was left there for dead. He survived 3 years in horrible conditions. And the young man had a hard time talking about it. The young man also had served in the Marine Corps because he wanted to be like his dad. He had so much respect for him. His wife said, yeah, his dad walks on water because of what he was able to survive. But you could also tell that there was an anger and a hurt that in this unfortunate period in U.S. history, people were left behind and left for dead. But after 3.5 years, he was finally rescued and able to be brought home. But you could see in this young man's face a deep hurt over that, even though he served as well. There was a longing for being able to talk about that and to deal with that hurt that's just always ongoing. That story for him is never going to go away.
So, Michael, what are you thinking?
As I'm listening to our stories, and I'm overwhelmed, really, with the power of human experience. That we not only witness by the encounters that we've had with these folks, but we're drawn into ourselves. I mean, we all know the energy, the power of the engagement, right? We're not flipping through a magazine and stopping at an interesting page and then moving on. We're intentionally encountering people, and so we're not clinicians. We're not just recording results from the laboratory that is very live and vibrant and moving in front of us. We are being spoken to. As you said a moment ago, Al, we're being changed. I am appreciating the significance of my own story. So that's some of what I'm thinking. I'm also thinking for folks who may be journeying with us, albeit at a distance through the internet in some fashion. The question might pop up for people, so what's your point? Aren't you the church? Aren't you missionaries? Aren't you a gospel people? Shouldn't you be trying to expand the size of the kingdom of God by joining souls with Jesus? Well, first of all, I don't have that ability. I don't think anybody else even though I admire and respect and esteem everybody here, I don't think any of us individually or collectively have that ability to join someone to Christ. More, I feel like what we're doing is we, instead of delivering the gospel, are being the gospel by being present where people are, just as Jesus did. And taking notice, seeing and knowing what's happening in people's experience. And as we have said in various ways in previous comments now, a lot of the folks seem to convey to us the sense that they haven't experienced that before. That in and of itself is an amazing gift. It's like water on a parched land that suddenly blooms when it looks like it was nothing but dry dust and no life could come at all. So when I have experienced that in my life, I have always responded that was a blessing of God to me. I can't help but think that our brothers and sisters that have passed by our booths and that we have had a chance to talk to might have been experiencing some of the same thing.
So, Michael, you just called the tattoo folks your brothers and sisters. Come on.
I did, didn't I? Yeah, we live in an age, don't we, of a lot of us and them. Fill in the blank who them are. People of a different race, a different socioeconomic experience, a different nation, a different religion, you name it. It's our lives are so framed by the us and them split. And I'm coming to feel more and more, particularly as a consequence of our engagement of these folks and their engagement of us, really, that it's all us. It's all us. It's just that there's a lot of us we haven't met yet.
Wow. May I ask